In the heart of Chicago, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams seemed within reach, there lived a woman whose story would soon become unforgettable. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. Instead, she carved her path with grit, determination, and an unshakable belief in herself. Her name was Andrea, and though many people admired her for her sharp mind and warm smile, not everyone saw her as an equal. Andrea worked at a mid-sized advertising agency, a place buzzing with creativity but also riddled with subtle biases that often went unnoticed or worse, ignored. She had climbed the ladder step by step, earning every promotion through hard work and talent. By the time she reached her current position as one of the top executives, she had proven herself time and again. But despite all her achievements, some coworkers still doubted her abilities simply because of the color of her skin. Every day, Andrea walked into the office knowing she had to be twice as good to get half the credit. Sometimes it felt exhausting. Colleagues would make backhanded comments like, "Wow, you're so assertive," when what they really meant was, "Why are you so confident?" Or they'd assume she got her promotions because of quotas rather than merit. These little jabs might have seemed harmless on the surface, but over time, they added up, chipping away at her patience. What most people didn't know about Andrea was that her life outside of work looked very different from what they imagined. At home, she shared her world with her husband, a man who preferred staying out of the limelight but commanded respect wherever he went. He was a self-made billionaire, someone who had built his empire from scratch through sheer perseverance and innovation. Despite his success, he never flaunted his wealth. Instead, he used it wisely, investing in causes close to his heart and supporting Andrea in everything she did. Their marriage was built on mutual admiration and trust. He encouraged Andrea to chase her dreams without worrying about financial security, reminding her that she deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, both at home and at work. For years, Andrea managed to brush off the occasional rude comment or dismissive glance, believing that proving herself professionally was enough. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. The environment at work was slowly wearing her down, even if she refused to admit it aloud. One fateful afternoon, everything came to a head. Andrea was leading a high-stakes meeting with key clients, presenting strategies to revamp their brand image. As usual, she captivated the room with her ideas and passion. But tensions were simmering beneath the surface. One of her colleagues, a senior manager named Greg, had always been jealous of Andrea's success. To him, her presence in the boardroom felt like a threat, a challenge to his authority. And today, his frustration boiled over. After the meeting ended, Greg cornered Andrea near the conference table. His face was red with anger and his words cut like knives. "You think you're better than everyone else, don't you?" he spat, his voice dripping with venom. Before Andrea could respond, he grabbed a can of soda from the table and threw its contents directly onto her. The cold liquid soaked her clothes, leaving her stunned and humiliated. The room fell silent. Everyone froze, unsure of what to do. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. Others whispered nervously among themselves, too afraid to intervene. Andrea stood there, dripping wet, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't just the sticky mess on her blouse or the sting of betrayal. It was the realization that no one in that room was willing to stand up for her. That evening, Andrea sat across from her husband at the dinner table, tears streaming down. Her face as she recounted the day's events. She told him how Greg had insulted her, how he had thrown the drink, and how her colleagues had done nothing to help. Her husband listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When she finished speaking, he took her hand in his and said softly, "You don't deserve this, I'll take care of it." Little did anyone know, those words marked the beginning of a storm that would sweep through the agency and change lives forever. This expanded version focuses on setting the stage for the story while keeping the tone natural and engaging. It introduces Andrea's struggles in a relatable way, emphasizing human emotions and interactions. Let me know if you'd like me to expand further or adjust any part. The next morning, Andrea woke up with a heavy heart. She replayed the events of the previous day over and over in her mind, each memory more painful than the last. The sticky sensation of soda soaking through her clothes, the sting of betrayal, from her colleagues who stood by silently. It all felt like a nightmare she couldn't shake off. But what weighed on her most was the realization that this wasn't just about one bad moment. It was about years of being underestimated, dismissed, and treated as if she didn't belong. Her husband noticed her quiet demeanor as they sat together at breakfast. He could see the sadness in her eyes even though she tried to hide it behind a brave smile. "Are you sure you want to go back there?" he asked gently, his voice filled with concern. Andrea hesitated. Part of her wanted to walk away and never look back, but another part of her felt a responsibility to fight for change. If she left now, wouldn't it feel like letting them win? "I don't know," Andrea admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I can't let this slide. Not anymore." Her husband nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had seen how hard she worked, how much she sacrificed to get where she was, and he knew that no one deserved to be treated the way she had been treated. With a determined look in his eyes, he said, "Then we'll make sure they don't get away with it." Later that day, Andrea returned to the office, her head held high despite the knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. As she walked through the doors, she could feel the tension in the air. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and people avoided meeting her gaze. Word of the incident had spread quickly, and everyone seemed to be waiting to see what would happen next. Would Greg face consequences, or would things go back to normal as if nothing had happened? Andrea's first stop was the Human Resources Department. She filed a formal complaint, detailing everything that had occurred during the meeting. The HR representative listened politely, nodding along as Andrea spoke, but she couldn't help noticing the lack of urgency in their tone. They promised to look into it, but Andrea had heard those empty words before. Deep down, she knew relying on the company to do the right thing might not be enough. Meanwhile, her husband began making plans of his own. He spent hours researching the agency, studying its financial records, ownership structure, and reputation in the industry. What he discovered only fueled his determination to act. The company wasn't just complacent, it was complicit. Over the years, several employees had reported similar incidents of harassment and discrimination, yet nothing meaningful had been done to address the toxic culture. It was clear that the leadership valued profits over people, turning a blind eye to the suffering of its workers. By the end of the week, Andrea's husband made his move. Dressed in a sleek suit that commanded attention, he arrived at the agency unannounced. Employees stopped in their tracks as he strode confidently through the lobby, his presence impossible to ignore. Some recognized him immediately, the billionaire, entrepreneur whose name often appeared in headlines. But others were left wondering why such a powerful figure was visiting their modest office. He requested an emergency meeting with the CEO and the entire executive team. When they gathered in the conference room, curiosity mingled with unease. No one knew what to expect. Was he here to invest, to partner, or was something else going on? Once everyone was seated, Andrea's husband wasted no time getting to the point. Calm but firm, he laid out the truth about what had happened to Andrea. He presented evidence, including security footage of the incident and testimonies from witnesses. His voice carried authority, leaving no room for denial or excuses. "This isn't just about one person," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "It's about a culture that allows this kind of behavior to exist unchecked. You failed her, and you failed others too." The room fell silent. The executives exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to respond. One of them tried to defend the company, insisting that they took these matters seriously. But Andrea's husband cut him off mid-sentence. "Serious? Really?" he shot back, his tone sharp but controlled. "If you were serious, you'd have acted long before now. Instead, you let this fester until it exploded." With that, he dropped his bombshell. He announced his intention to acquire the company outright. Using his vast resources, he would take full control of the agency, dismantling its current leadership and restructuring it from the ground up. The executives stared at him in stunned silence, realizing there was no way to stop him. Within days, the deal was finalized and the agency belonged to him. But acquiring the company was only the beginning. True to his word, Andrea's husband implemented sweeping changes. Every employee involved in covering up the incident, or failing to support Andrea when she needed it most, was fired without hesitation. Greg, the man responsible for throwing the drink, was handed over to the authorities, facing charges for assault and hate crimes. Justice was served, and news of the fallout spread like wildfire, sparking outrage and admiration across the country. For Andrea, watching her husband take charge was both empowering and overwhelming. She appreciated his fierce loyalty and willingness to fight for her, but she also grappled with mixed emotions. While she was relieved to see accountability, she couldn't help feeling frustrated that it took someone with immense power to make people listen. Why hadn't anyone stood up for her before? Why did it take a billionaire stepping in to force real change? Despite everything, Andrea found strength in the chaos. She realized that this wasn't just her battle anymore. It was a movement. Her story inspired countless others to speak out about their own experiences with discrimination and injustice. Social media lit up with hashtags supporting her, and journalists clamored to tell her tale. For the first time, Andrea felt like she wasn't alone. As the dust settled, Andrea made a decision. She chose not to return to her old role at the agency. Instead, she decided to channel her energy into something new, something bigger. With her husband's support, she launched her own consulting firm, dedicated to helping marginalized professionals navigate the challenges of corporate environments. Her mission was simple: to create spaces where everyone could thrive, regardless of race, gender, or background. Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, Andrea knew she was ready to face it. She had weathered the storm, and now she was determined to build a brighter future, not just for herself, but for others who deserved the same chance to succeed. This part dives deeper into the aftermath of the incident, focusing on the emotional impact on Andrea and the decisive actions taken by her husband. It maintains a natural flow while emphasizing human emotions and motivations. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments. The days following the takeover of the agency were a whirlwind of activity. Andrea's husband didn't waste a single moment. He was determined to make sure that what happened to Andrea and countless others would never happen again under his watch. But he wasn't just focused on punishing the guilty. He wanted to create real, lasting change. For him, this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and building a workplace where everyone felt safe, valued, and respected. First things first, he called a company-wide meeting. Every employee, from interns to senior managers, was required to attend. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. People whispered nervously, unsure of what to expect. Some feared they'd lose their jobs, while others wondered how drastic the changes would be. When Andrea's husband walked in, the room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. He stood at the front, calm but commanding, and began to speak. "I'm not here to sugarcoat anything," he started, his voice steady but firm. "What happened here is unacceptable. Not only did someone commit an act of hate, but many of you stood by and did nothing. Silence is complicity, and if you're part of a system that allows this kind of behavior to exist, then you're part of the problem." His words hit hard. No one dared to interrupt or argue. They knew he was right. He went on to explain the steps he planned to take to transform the company. First, he brought in experts, diversity consultants, anti-bias trainers, and mental health professionals, to assess the workplace culture and recommend improvements. These weren't just token gestures. They were mandatory programs that every employee had to complete. There would be no shortcuts. Next, he restructured the leadership team. Gone were the old executives who had turned a blind eye to years of misconduct. In their place, he hired leaders who shared his vision for inclusivity and fairness. These new hires came from diverse backgrounds, with proven track records of championing equality in their respective fields. One of them, a woman known for her work in corporate ethics, was appointed as the new CEO. Her first order of business? Creating a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and harassment. But the changes didn't stop there. Andrea's husband introduced transparent reporting systems so employees could safely report incidents without fear of retaliation. Anonymous hotlines, confidential email addresses, and regular check-ins ensured that everyone had a voice. He also set up monthly town hall meetings where workers could openly discuss issues affecting them. It was a radical shift from the secretive, oppressive environment that had existed before. For Andrea, watching all of this unfold was bittersweet. On one hand, she felt a sense of vindication. Finally, people were paying attention to the problems she and others had faced for years. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel frustrated. Why had it taken such extreme measures to spark action? Why hadn't anyone listened when she and others tried to speak up earlier? Still, she refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channeled her energy into supporting the transformation. She became an advisor to the new leadership team, sharing her insights and experiences to help shape the company's future. Her input was invaluable, especially when it came to designing policies that truly addressed the needs of marginalized employees. Slowly, but surely, the agency began to change, not because of any one person, but because of a collective effort to do better. Meanwhile, Andrea's decision to step away from her role at the agency marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. With her husband's encouragement, she poured her passion into launching her own consulting firm. Her goal was simple yet ambitious: to help companies create inclusive workplaces where everyone could thrive. She envisioned a world where no one had to endure what she had gone through, a world where talent and hard work were rewarded, regardless of race, gender, or background. Starting a business from scratch wasn't easy, but Andrea approached it with the same determination that had brought her success in the past. She spent long hours researching, networking, and crafting strategies tailored to the unique challenges faced by marginalized professionals. Her firm quickly gained traction, attracting clients who were eager to learn from her expertise. Before long, she was traveling across the country, giving workshops and speaking at conferences about the importance of diversity and inclusion. Her message resonated deeply with audiences. People saw themselves in her story, the struggles, the resilience, the fight for justice. Many reached out to thank her, sharing their own experiences of discrimination and expressing gratitude for her courage in speaking out. Andrea realized that her journey wasn't just about her anymore. It was about inspiring others to stand up and demand better. As her consulting firm grew, Andrea's husband continued to use his influence to advocate for systemic reform. Together, they founded a foundation aimed at supporting victims of workplace harassment and promoting equitable hiring practices nationwide. The foundation provided resources, legal assistance, and mentorship to those in need, empowering individuals to reclaim their dignity and pursue their dreams. Their efforts sparked a ripple effect that extended far beyond the walls of the agency. News outlets covered their story extensively, shining a spotlight on the pervasive issue of workplace discrimination. Social media campaigns erupted, with hashtags like Children Stand for Justice and No More Silence trending worldwide. Countless people joined the conversation, sharing their own stories and calling for accountability in their industries. Through it all, Andrea remained grounded. Despite the growing recognition, she stayed true to her roots, always remembering why she started this journey in the first place. She often reflected on that fateful day when everything changed, the day she was humiliated in front of her colleagues. It was a painful memory, yes, but it also served as a reminder of how far she had come. Without that moment, she might never have found the strength to fight back and inspire others to do the same. One evening, as she sat with her husband discussing their progress, Andrea smiled softly. "You know," she said, "I used to think I was fighting this battle alone. But now I realize I'm not. There are so many people out there who want to see change. They just needed someone to show them it's possible." Her husband nodded, squeezing her hand affectionately. "And you're showing them," he replied. "Every day you're proving that standing up for what's right can make a difference." It was true. Through her resilience, compassion, and unwavering commitment to justice, Andrea had become a beacon of hope for countless individuals. Her story was proof that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance to rise, to rebuild, and to create a brighter future for yourself and for others. As the weeks turned into months, Andrea's consulting firm began to take shape in ways she hadn't even imagined. What started as a small idea fueled by her pain and determination quickly grew into something much bigger, a movement. Her workshops weren't just about teaching companies how to check boxes or meet diversity quotas. They were about fostering real understanding and empathy. She wanted people to see each other as humans first, not titles, stereotypes, or statistics. Her sessions were raw, honest, and deeply personal. She didn't shy away from sharing her own story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. She talked about the day Greg threw that soda on her, the silence of her colleagues, and the feeling of being invisible despite all her achievements. But she also spoke about resilience, about finding strength in vulnerability, and about turning pain into purpose. People listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They saw themselves in her words, whether they were victims of discrimination or bystanders who had stayed silent when they shouldn't have. One particular workshop stood out in Andrea's mind. It was held at a tech startup in San Francisco, a company infamous for its toxic culture and high turnover rates. The room was packed with employees, ranging from entry-level coders to senior executives. At first, the atmosphere was tense. No one wanted to admit their workplace had problems, let alone talk about them openly. But Andrea had a way of breaking down walls. She started by asking a simple question. How many of you have ever felt like you didn't belong here? To her surprise, nearly every hand in the room went up. Some hesitated before raising theirs, glancing around nervously, while others shot their hands into the air without hesitation. Andrea nodded knowingly. "You're not alone," she said, softly. And neither was I. From there, the floodgates opened. People began sharing their stories, some tearfully, others angrily, but all honestly. A young woman recounted how her ideas were consistently dismissed until a male colleague repeated them. A man of color described being mistaken for the janitor more times than he could count. Another employee talked about the pressure to conform, to tone down their personality or hide parts of their identity to fit in. The room buzzed with emotion, a mix of sadness, frustration, and relief. For the first time, these individuals felt heard. By the end of the session, the CEO of the company approached Andrea, visibly shaken. "I had no idea," he admitted, shaking his head. "I thought we were doing better than this." Andrea didn't sugarcoat her response. "Ignorance isn't an excuse," she told him gently but firmly, "but it's never too late to do better." That conversation sparked a ripple effect within the company. Within weeks, they implemented new policies, hired diversity officers, and created safe spaces for employees to voice concerns. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that's what mattered most. Back home, Andrea continued to balance her growing business with her role as an advisor to the transformed advertising agency. Under new leadership, the company was slowly shedding its toxic reputation. Employees who had once feared speaking up now felt empowered to share their thoughts and ideas. Morale improved, creativity flourished, and productivity soared. Clients noticed the difference too, praising the fresh energy and innovative campaigns coming out of the agency. It was proof that investing in people paid off, not just morally, but financially as well. Despite the success, Andrea couldn't help but reflect on the cost of it all. How many sleepless nights had she endured? How many tears had she shed in private, wondering if she was strong enough to keep going? And then there was the guilt, the nagging feeling that maybe she should have done more sooner. For the people who didn't have someone like her husband to step in and fight for them, these thoughts weighed heavily on her, but they also pushed her forward. If she could use her platform to help even one person avoid the pain she'd experienced, it would be worth it. Her husband remained her rock throughout it all. He admired her tenacity and supported her in every way possible, whether it was helping her draft proposals, accompanying her to speaking engagements, or simply listening when she needed to vent. Their bond only grew stronger as they worked side by side, united by a shared vision of justice and equality. They often joked that they made quite the team, one building businesses, the other dismantling broken systems. But beneath the humor lay a deep respect and love for each other. Outside of work, Andrea found joy in the little things. Long walks in the park, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and books, and quiet evenings spent cooking together reminded her that life wasn't just about fighting battles. It was also about celebrating victories, big and small. One of her favorite moments came during a family dinner with close friends. As they sat around the table laughing and sharing stories, one of her friends raised a glass and said, "To Andrea, for showing us what courage looks like." The room erupted in applause, leaving Andrea momentarily speechless. She smiled, feeling grateful for the support system that had carried her through the toughest times. Yet even as her star continued to rise, Andrea never lost sight of her roots. She remembered the days when she was just another ambitious young professional, trying to prove herself in a world that didn't always believe in her. Those memories kept her grounded, reminding her why she started this journey in the first place. She often visited schools and community centers, mentoring young people who dreamed of careers in marketing and advertising. She told them not to let anyone tell them they weren't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. "Your voice matters," she'd say. "Don't let anyone silence it." Word of Andrea's impact spread far beyond her immediate circle. Journalists wrote articles about her, calling her a trailblazer and a force for change. Social media lit up with praise, with strangers tagging her in posts and thanking her for inspiring them to stand up against injustice. Awards rolled in, recognizing her contributions to diversity and inclusion. But for Andrea, none of that compared to the letters she received from people whose lives she had touched. One note, written by a young woman struggling to navigate a hostile work environment, brought tears to her eyes. "Because of you, I know I'm not alone. Thank you for giving me hope." It was moments like these that reminded Andrea why she kept pushing forward. Sure, there were days when the weight of it all felt overwhelming, when the world seemed too broken to fix. But then she'd think about the faces of those she'd helped, the smiles, the hugs, the heartfelt thank yous, and she'd remember that change was possible. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly possible. As she looked toward the future, Andrea knew there was still so much work to be done. Discrimination didn't disappear overnight, and neither did the scars it left behind. But she also knew that every step forward mattered, no matter how small. Whether it was helping one person find their voice or transforming an entire organization, she was determined to keep fighting, for herself, for others, and for a world where everyone could thrive. As Andrea's influence continued to grow, so did the challenges she faced. The more noise she made, the more resistance she encountered. Some people praised her efforts, calling her a hero and a beacon of hope. Others, however, weren't so kind. There were critics who dismissed her as someone who only succeeded because of her husband's wealth and connections. Anonymous comments online accused her of exploiting her pain for fame, while industry insiders whispered behind closed doors that she was too emotional or not qualified enough to lead such a movement. At first, the negativity stung. Andrea spent hours reading through hateful messages late at night, questioning whether she was doing the right thing. Was she making a difference, or was she just stirring up trouble? Her husband noticed the toll it was taking on her. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, he gently took her phone out of her hands. "You can't let them win," he said firmly but kindly. "Their opinions don't define you. What defines you is how many lives you've touched, and how many more you'll touch." His words struck a chord. Andrea realized that focusing on the haters wouldn't help anyone, not her, not the people counting on her, and certainly not the cause she was fighting for. Instead of letting the criticism bring her down, she decided to channel it into fuel. If people doubted her, she'd prove them wrong, not by arguing with them, but by working harder, reaching further, and making an even bigger impact. One of the ways she did this was by expanding her consulting firm beyond workshops and seminars. She launched a podcast called Breaking Barriers, where she interviewed professionals from all walks of life about their experiences with discrimination and resilience. From entry-level employees to CEOs, each guest shared their story and their own words, creating a platform for voices that were often ignored or silenced. The podcast quickly gained traction, attracting listeners from around the world who found comfort, inspiration, and practical advice in the conversations. Through the podcast, Andrea connected with someone who would become one of her closest allies, a retired lawyer named Lisa. Lisa had spent decades advocating for workplace equality, representing countless victims of harassment and discrimination. When she heard Andrea's story, she reached out, offering her expertise to help amplify the message. Together, they co-authored a book titled Rising Strong: How to Thrive in the Face of Adversity. The book combined Andrea's personal journey with Lisa's legal insights, providing readers with tools to navigate toxic environments and advocate for systemic change. The release of the book marked another milestone in Andrea's career. It debuted at the top of bestseller lists and sparked discussions in boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms across the country. People began organizing reading groups and community events based on its themes, turning what started as a single woman's fight into a nationwide movement. For Andrea, seeing her story inspire action on such a large scale was both humbling and empowering. But perhaps the most rewarding part of her journey came when she started receiving invitations to speak at schools and universities. Young people, eager to learn how to navigate the complexities of the modern workplace, packed auditoriums to hear her speak. Andrea loved talking to students because she saw herself in them, their passion, their idealism, their hunger for justice. She told them stories about the mistakes she'd made, the lessons she'd learned, and the moments that had shaped her into the person she was today. "You're going to face obstacles," she'd tell them, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "People will try to tell you you're not good enough, smart enough, or strong enough. Don't listen to them. Believe in yourself even when no one else does. And remember, your value isn't determined by what others think of you. It's determined by what you do with the opportunities you have." Her words resonated deeply with young audiences, many of whom approached her after her talks to share their dreams and fears. Some wanted advice on breaking into competitive industries. Others sought guidance on dealing with difficult bosses or coworkers. Andrea always made time for them, listening patiently and offering encouragement. She knew firsthand how isolating it could feel to be underestimated, and she didn't want anyone to walk that path alone. While Andrea focused on mentoring the next generation, her husband continued using his resources to drive systemic change. He partnered with nonprofit organizations, funding initiatives aimed at closing the racial wealth gap and promoting economic empowerment in underserved communities. Together, they also launched a scholarship program for students pursuing careers in fields where diversity was sorely lacking: tech, finance, law, and medicine. The scholarships weren't just about money. They included mentorship, internships, and networking opportunities designed to set recipients up for long-term success. The couple's combined efforts created a ripple effect that extended far beyond their immediate circle. Companies began reaching out to Andrea for guidance on improving their diversity and inclusion practices. Lawmakers consulted with her husband on crafting policies to protect workers' rights. Media outlets covered their story extensively, shining a spotlight on the importance of addressing inequality in all its forms. Slowly but surely, the conversation shifted from why change was necessary to how it could be achieved. Despite the progress, Andrea knew there was still a long way to go. Discrimination wasn't something that could be eradicated overnight. It was deeply ingrained in systems, institutions, and mindsets that had been in place for generations, but she also knew that every step forward mattered. Whether it was helping one person find their footing or influencing an entire industry, she refused to give up. Her determination inspired those around her, including her husband. Though he rarely sought the spotlight, he marveled at Andrea's ability to turn pain into purpose. "You've changed the game," he told her one evening, as they reflected on everything they'd accomplished. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you." Andrea smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the support of her loved ones, for the courage of those who stood beside her, and for the resilience that had carried her through the darkest days. Yet she remained grounded, knowing that true change required constant vigilance and effort. "We've come a long way," she replied, "but we're not done yet, not by a long shot." Years had passed since the day Andrea walked into that conference room, only to walk out drenched in soda and humiliation. What started as a moment of pain had transformed into a lifetime mission, a journey that touched thousands of lives and reshaped entire industries. Now standing on stage at a glittering gala honoring trailblazers in social justice, Andrea couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come. The room was filled with people who mattered: activists, policymakers, educators, and everyday heroes. But for Andrea, the real victory wasn't the applause or the accolades. It was knowing that her story had sparked something bigger than herself. As she accepted her award, the crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle of the moment. But Andrea's focus remained steady. She looked out at the sea of faces, seeing not just admirers but kindred spirits. People who understood what it meant to fight for justice even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Her voice trembled slightly as she began her speech, but her words carried weight. "I never wanted any of this," she admitted, pausing to let the truth sink in. "I didn't ask to be thrown into the spotlight, to have my pain become a headline. All I wanted was to do my job, to work hard, contribute, and earn respect like anyone else. But life doesn't always give us what we want. Sometimes it gives us what we need." She went on to recount the day that changed everything: the insults, the drink being hurled at her, the deafening silence of her colleagues. "That moment taught me two things," she said, her voice growing stronger. "First, it taught me that no one should ever have to endure what I went through. And second, it taught me the power of resilience. When someone tries to knock you down, you don't have to stay there. You can rise. You can rebuild. You can rewrite the script." Her husband watched from the front row, pride shining in his eyes. He remembered the night she came home devastated, tears streaming down her face, wondering if she'd ever recover. Now, here she was, standing tall, inspiring others to do the same. It was a testament to her strength, and to the fact that they'd faced this battle together. Andrea shifted gears, turning her attention to the people in the audience. "Change doesn't happen because of one person," she said earnestly. "It happens because of all of us. Every time someone speaks up, stands up, or reaches out to help another human being, we move closer to a world where everyone belongs. That's the legacy I want to leave behind, not just for myself but for my children and their children after them." The mention of family brought warmth to the room. Andrea thought about her kids, who were growing up in a household built on love, equality, and purpose. They weren't old enough yet to fully understand the scope of her work, but they saw the values she lived by every day. She hoped they'd carry those lessons forward, using their voices to make the world a better place. After the gala ended, Andrea and her husband slipped away quietly, avoiding the swarm of reporters waiting outside. They preferred to celebrate in their own way, over a quiet dinner at home where they could truly savor the moment without distractions. As they sat across from each other, plates of homemade pasta steaming in front of them, Andrea smiled softly. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked, her tone tinged with both hope and uncertainty. Her husband leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "Enough isn't a number," he replied thoughtfully. "It's a feeling. And if you're asking whether we've made a difference, then yes, we have. But the work will never truly be finished. There will always be more barriers to break, more hearts to open, more minds to change." Andrea nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Progress wasn't linear. It ebbed and flowed, requiring constant effort and vigilance. Yet she felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that she'd played a part in moving the needle forward. Whether it was mentoring young professionals, transforming toxic workplaces, or advocating for policy changes, she'd given everything she had, and then some. In the weeks that followed, Andrea returned to her routine with renewed energy. She continued hosting her podcast, speaking at events, and advising companies on building inclusive cultures. But she also carved out time for herself, prioritizing self-care and reflection. She realized that in order to keep fighting for others, She needed to take care of her own well-being too. Yoga sessions, long walks, and journaling became staples of her daily life, helping her stay grounded amidst the chaos. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, Andrea stumbled upon a post from a former colleague at the advertising agency. The woman wrote about how Andrea's courage had inspired her to leave a toxic relationship and pursue a career she truly loved. "Thank you for showing me that I deserve better," the post read. "Because of you, I found my voice." Tears welled up in Andrea's eyes as she read the message. This was why she kept going, not for fame or recognition, but for moments like these, for the countless individuals who found strength in her story and used it to transform their own lives. Each thank you note, each hug, each smile reminded her that her efforts weren't in vain. Looking ahead, Andrea knew there would be new challenges to face. Discrimination wouldn't disappear overnight, and neither would the scars it left behind. But she also knew that momentum was on her side. More people were waking up to the realities of inequality, demanding accountability and action. Movements were growing, policies were shifting, and conversations were evolving. The world was changing. One step, one story, one person at a time. Agnew. A crisp autumn morning, Andrea stood on a hill overlooking the city, watching the sun rise over the skyline. Behind her, her husband wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. "The future," she replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Not just ours, but everyone's. We've come so far, but there's still so much to do. And I'm ready for it. For all of it." Her husband smiled, squeezing her hand. "So am I." Together, they turned and walked back toward the car, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Through pain, perseverance, and partnership, they had created a legacy rooted in love, justice, and hope. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly have its twists and turns, they knew they'd face it together, hand in hand, heart to heart.